The alarm clock rang at 6 in the morning as usual. Otimus Crowther reached for the bedside table, feeling for the phone, and turned off the sound. Yesha didn't even stir beside him. She was sleeping soundly as always. He got up, stretching, and headed for the bathroom. A hot shower helped him wake up completely. In the mirror, he saw a tired 50-year-old man with short graying hair and deep wrinkles under his eyes. In the kitchen, Odious turned on the coffee maker and took eggs out of the refrigerator. While they were frying, he heard footsteps in the hallway. It was Davis going to the bathroom. Zephyr usually got up later than his brother, but for some reason, he was up earlier than usual today. "Good morning, Dad," Davis yawned as he entered the kitchen. "How did you sleep?" "Fine, son. You're up early today. We have our first class at 9 and then we have to go straight to work. Zeph, get up too. We'll go together." Zephyr appeared in the kitchen doorway, disheveled and sleepy. The twins were similar, but not identical. Davis had always been more outgoing, while Zeph preferred to keep quiet and observe. "Coffee?" Odious asked. "Yes, please." Odious poured 3 cups of coffee. The apartment was getting noisier. Yesha finally woke up and quickly got ready. She worked as a maid at a central hotel, and her shift started at 7:30. She was always late. "I don't have time for breakfast," she said, grabbing her bag. "See you tonight." Odious nodded. Their relationship had become somewhat formal. It wasn't that they were fighting, they just talked about what was necessary. Yesha kissed her sons and quickly left the apartment. "Mom, in a hurry as always," Zephyr remarked. "That's work," Odious replied, although he knew it wasn't just work. The sons finished breakfast and also began to get ready. Davis rummaged through his backpack, checking that he had everything he needed for his lectures. Zephyr stood by the window, looking out at the street. "It's going to rain today," he said. "How do you know?" "I can feel it. Come on, brother, it's time to go." They said goodbye to their father and left. The apartment was empty. Otimus finished his eggs, drank the last of his coffee, and started getting ready for work. He took a pack of cigarettes from the kitchen drawer, even though he had quit smoking a year ago. Sometimes he still felt like smoking. He found his car keys and mailbox keys in his jeans pocket. The auto repair shop was a 10-minute drive from home. Odious had been working there for 15 years and knew every corner of the place. The smell of motor oil and metal had long since become familiar. Jerome, his colleague and friend, was already working under the hood of an old Chevrolet. "Hey, Odai," Jerome greeted him, crawling out from under the car. "How's it going at home?" "Fine, same as usual." Jerome was 5 years younger than Odai, but he looked even younger. He was always smiling and joking. Today there was something different in his eyes, as if he wanted to ask something but couldn't bring himself to do it. "Listen, Odai, I've been meaning to ask you something. You said you had some doubts about your family?" Odious froze, holding the wrench. He had indeed shared his suspicions with Jerome a few months ago, but then regretted it. "No, it was just nonsense. Forget it." "But you said that the children weren't like you, that Yesha was acting strangely." "Jerome, let's not talk about it. Everything's fine." Jerome shrugged and went back to work. Odious also started repairing the truck that was parked in the far corner of the workshop, but his thoughts wouldn't leave him. He had indeed ordered a DNA test 3 weeks ago. He had done it secretly, taking hair from his son's combs and his own saliva. The lab promised to send the results within a month. The workday dragged on. Odious caught himself thinking about the evening, his family, and the letter that might already be waiting for him in the mailbox. Jerome tried to make conversation, but Odious responded in monosyllables. At lunchtime, they sat in a small break room, eating sandwiches and drinking soda. "You seem strange today, Odai. Is everything okay?" "Yes, just tired, didn't sleep well." "I understand. I have that sometimes too. My wife is always nagging me about something." Odai smiled. Jerome had been married for 3 years, and his wife did indeed love to nag. But at least she was home every evening, didn't stay late at work, and didn't come home late smelling of someone else's cologne. After lunch, the work went faster. Odie concentrated on the repairs, and even forgot his worries for a while. At 5 o'clock, he finished work, said goodbye to Jerome, and drove home. On the way, he stopped at a store to buy bread and milk. At the checkout, he was served by a young girl who was flirting with every customer. Odious could barely hear her words, thinking about the letter. At home, he put the bags in the kitchen and sat down in an armchair in the living room. The TV was on in the background, but Odious wasn't watching it. He was waiting for Yesha to come home from work. Her shift was supposed to end at 6, but she rarely came home before 8. At 7 o'clock, his sons called. Davis said they were going to stay at a friend's house to work on a college project. Odellis didn't argue. At 8:30, the door finally opened, and Yesha entered the apartment. "Sorry I'm late," she said without even looking at him. "I had a lot of work to do." "I see. Is dinner ready?" "I didn't have time to cook." "Should we order pizza?" Odious nodded. They ordered food and sat down at the table in silence. Yesha checked her phone, responding to messages. Odious watched her. She had once been a beautiful woman, and he had been proud to call her his wife. Now there was a wall between them that neither of them wanted to break down. "How's work?" he asked, more out of politeness. "Fine. I'm very tired. I'm going to take a shower, then go to bed." "Okay." Yesha went into the bathroom. Odamus finished his pizza and went to the kitchen. He opened the desk drawer and took out the keys to the mailbox. His heart was beating faster than usual. It was time to find out the truth. The mailboxes were on the first floor, next to the entrance to the building. Otis went down the stairs, holding the keys in his hand. The hallway was quiet. Only the sounds of televisions from neighboring apartments could be heard. He opened his mailbox and took out several letters. Among them was an envelope from a medical laboratory. Odious went up to his apartment. Yesha was already asleep. His sons had not yet returned. He sat down in the kitchen and placed the envelope in front of him. His name and address were written on it. In the corner was the name of the laboratory and the words "genetic analysis results." His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the letter, but he didn't open it right away. Something inside him told him to wait, to put it off. Maybe he wasn't ready to know the truth. Maybe it was better to live in ignorance. Odious sat in the kitchen, staring at the unopened envelope, wondering if his life would change after he found out what was written inside. Odious ran his finger along the edge of the envelope, tearing it open slowly, as if trying to delay the inevitable. He pulled out the folded sheet of paper and smoothed it out on the table. At the top was the name of the laboratory and the date of the analysis. Below were technical data and sample numbers. At the very bottom, in bold letters, were the words that changed his entire life. Paternity excluded. Probability of biological relationship, 0%. Odious read those lines over and over, as if hoping that they would change with each reading. But no. The results were unequivocal. Neither Davis nor Zephyr were his biological sons. 20 years of his life, 20 years of love, 20 years of believing that these boys were his flesh and blood, had been a lie. He put the sheet on the table and closed his eyes. His head was empty, except for a distant rumbling like a severe headache. Odious opened the refrigerator, took out a beer, and drank half the bottle in one gulp. The alcohol didn't help. The pain inside only intensified. Time dragged on agonizingly slowly. Odious paced around the apartment, picked up the sheet with the results, read it again, then threw it on the table. At 10 o'clock, his sons returned. They entered the apartment noisily, talking about something of their own. "Hi, Dad," Davis called out. "You're not asleep yet." "No, I'm awake," Otis replied, coming out of the kitchen. He looked at them and tried to find something of himself in their faces. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. How could he have been so blind all these years? "Is everything okay?" Zephyr asked. "You seem strange." "Everything's fine." "Go to bed. I need to talk to Mom." The sons shrugged and went to their room. Odious returned to the kitchen and sat down at the table again. At 11:30, the front door finally opened. Yesha entered quietly, clearly hoping that everyone was already asleep. "We need to talk," Odious said loudly. Yesha froze at the kitchen doorway. She looked tired, but something in her husband's voice made her tense. "About what?" "Sit down." She sat down across from him. Odious silently handed her the sheet with the results. Yesha took it and began to read. Her face changed color. At first, she turned pale, Then her face was covered with red spots. Odysseus, 20 years, he shouted, banging his fist on the table. You've been lying to me for 20 years! I wanted to tell you. You wanted? When? In 30 years? In 40? Yesha covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. It was before we got married, she said quietly. I had another man. When I found out I was pregnant, I thought the children were yours. You thought? You didn't know? We had just started dating. I wasn't sure who the father was. And you decided to keep quiet? To let me raise someone else's children? I fell in love with you. I wanted to be with you. And I knew you would love them as your own. Odysseus stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward. Anger overwhelmed him. 20 years he had changed their diapers, taught them to walk, helped them with their homework, and been proud of their achievements. 20 years he had considered them his own flesh and blood. Who is he? Odysseus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. It doesn't matter. Who is he? Marcus Johnson. He worked at the hotel when I first got the job. Where is he now? I don't know. We haven't spoken since I found out I was pregnant. Otimus grabbed an empty beer bottle and threw it at the wall. The bottle shattered, sending shards flying across the floor. Yesha jumped up. Odysseus, please calm down! Calm down? How can I calm down? You stole my life! You stole 20 years of my life! Footsteps could be heard in the hallway. The sons heard the shouting and came out of their room. Davis and Zephyr stood in the doorway, looking at their parents with fear and confusion. What's going on? Davis asked. Ask your mother, Odysseus barked. Ask her who your real father is. The sons looked at each other. Yesha began to cry. Dad, what are you talking about? Asked Zephyr. Otimus grabbed the sheet with the results and threw it on the floor between them. Read it! Read it and find out what your mother has been hiding from us for 20 years. Davis bent down and picked up the sheet. His face contorted as he read the contents. Zephyr, reading over his brother's shoulder, also turned pale. Is this true? Davis asked, looking at his mother. I wanted to tell you, Yesha sobbed. I was going to tell you when you were older. We're 20 years old, Mom, Zephyr shouted. When are we going to be older? Odysseus felt his anger turn into something else. Into despair, into emptiness, into terrible pain. He looked at the boys. No, not boys anymore, but young men, and realized that they were no longer his sons, genetically, legally, maybe even emotionally after today. Dad, you're still our father, said Davis, trying to get closer to him. Don't come near me, Otimus shouted. He pushed his son away and headed for the apartment door. He put on his jacket and left, slamming the door behind him. It was cold on the landing. Otimus leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. He could hear voices behind the door, but he couldn't make out the words. He went downstairs and out into the street. The night air was cool and damp. Odysseus started walking without thinking about where he was going, just walking to move, to think, to try to figure out what to do next. He knew every corner of the neighborhood. Odysseus walked past the store where he bought bread, past the auto repair shop where he worked, past the school where he took his children when they were little. All these places now seemed foreign, as if he were seeing them for the first time. He sat down on a bench in the park on the corner. It was around 1 a.m. The few passers-by hurried past, paying no attention to him. Otimus took out his phone and found some old photos. There were Davis and Zephyr at the age of 5, wearing matching birthday suits. Here they were graduating from kindergarten. Here was their first day of school. In all the photos they were smiling, and he stood next to them, a proud father, unaware of the truth. He sat on the bench until 3 a.m, until the cold became unbearable. Then he got up and slowly walked home. The apartment was quiet. Everyone was asleep. Otis quietly went into the kitchen. Someone had already cleaned up the broken glass. There was a note from Yesha on the table. I'm so sorry, I love you. Otis crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash can. He went into the bedroom. Yesha was asleep, turned toward the wall. Odysseus didn't undress, just lay down on top of the blanket and closed his eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts swirled in his head. What should he do next? How could he live with this knowledge? How could he look his children and wife in the eye? At 4 a.m, he got up and went to the living room. He sat down in his favorite chair and tried to turn on the TV, but the sound seemed too loud. He turned it off and sat in silence, waiting for dawn. Light began to filter through the windows around 5:30. The apartment gradually filled with morning light. Odious got up and walked over to the closet in the living room. On the top shelf, behind boxes of Christmas decorations, lay an old pistol. He had bought it 5 years ago when there had been a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. He had never fired it, only taken it to the shooting range once to see if it worked. The gun was in a cardboard box, next to a box of ammunition. Odious took out the weapon and slowly loaded it. 5 bullets in the chamber. The metal was cold and heavy in his hand. He returned to his chair, placed the gun on his knees, and sat staring at the door to his bedroom, behind which Yesha was sleeping. Davis and Zephyr were sleeping behind the door to the children's room. His family, or what he had considered his family for 20 years. Dawn had broken. The apartment was getting lighter. Somewhere upstairs, someone turned on the water. A new day was beginning. At 6 in the morning, the sun was already fully illuminating the living room. Odious sat in his chair, the gun lying on his knees. He hadn't moved for about an hour, just listening to the silence of the apartment. The same thought kept running through his head. 20 years of his life stolen from him. 20 years of fatherhood that turned out to be an illusion. How could he go on living with that knowledge? Outside the window, it was the start of a normal morning. He could hear the sounds of the city waking up, dogs barking, car doors slamming, people rushing to work. Life went on as if nothing had changed. But for Odious, everything had changed. His world had collapsed last night when he read the test results. Then he heard footsteps coming from the bedroom. Yesha had woken up. She came out into the hallway barefoot, wearing the light blue nightgown he had given her last Christmas. She had seemed so happy when she unwrapped the gift. Now Odious realized that it had been a game too, a pretense. Yesha went into the bathroom, then headed for the kitchen. Odious got up from the chair, clutching the gun in his hand. The metal was cold and heavy. His heart was beating so loudly that it seemed to echo throughout the apartment. Or was this his last chance to change his mind? The last moment when he could put the gun back on the top shelf of the closet and try to live with this knowledge. "Odious?" Yesha called from the kitchen. "Are you awake?" Her voice was the same as always, a little hoarse in the morning, tired. How many times had he heard that voice in 20 years? How many times had she said good morning and asked him how he slept? All those years had been a lie. He didn't answer. He slowly walked into the kitchen. Yesha was standing at the stove, turning on the kettle. Her hair was tousled, and there were pillow marks on her neck. She looked so ordinary, so innocent. How could she have kept such a secret for 20 years? Yesha turned to him and met his gaze. There was something alert in her gaze, as if she sensed danger. "I wanted to talk to you. We need to discuss everything calmly. I know last night was difficult, but we can work this out." Odamus raised his hand with the gun. Yesha saw the weapon and froze. Her eyes widened in horror. She took a step back, hitting her back against the stove. "Odious, what are you doing? Put the gun away! You're scaring me!" 20 years, he said quietly. 20 years you've been lying to me every day. Every time I hugged my children, every time I said I loved you. Please listen to me. I can explain everything. Yes, I made a mistake, but I really loved you. I still do." "Loved?" His voice grew louder. "What kind of love is that, if you let me raise someone else's children? You knew the truth and kept quiet." "I thought the children were yours. I swear I did. And when I realized that maybe they weren't, it was too late. They became your sons. You loved them so much. Don't lie to me anymore." He pulled the trigger. The shot rang out deafeningly in the small kitchen. The smell of gunpowder filled the air. Yesha screamed and grabbed her chest. Blood began to seep between her fingers. She looked at him in disbelief, as if she couldn't believe what was happening. "Odious," she whispered and fell to the floor. Blood began to spread beneath her body, staining her light-colored nightgown dark red. The kettle on the stove continued to whistle, ready to boil. Odamus stared at his wife's body and felt a strange emptiness. Not relief, not remorse, just emptiness. Screams came from his son's room. The door flew open and Davis ran out into the hallway. He was wearing only his underwear and a t-shirt, his hair tousled. "What happened? Dad!" He saw his father with a gun and his mother on the kitchen floor. His face was contorted with horror. Davis froze, unable to move. "Oh my God! Dad, what have you done? Mom!" Zephyr appeared behind Davis. He was also half naked, clearly having jumped out of bed at the sound of the gunshot. The brothers stood in the doorway, unable to move forward or backward. "You are not my sons," said Odious, turning to them. "Dad, please put the gun down. Let's talk. Mom is hurt. She needs help. She's dead, and you are not my sons." Davis tried to take a step toward the kitchen, extending his arms in a conciliatory gesture. "Dad, I know it was hard to hear the truth yesterday, but you're still our father. You raised us. You taught us everything. Blood isn't the only thing that makes a man a father." There's nothing to talk about. The second shot rang out. Davis clutched his chest and slowly sank to the floor, leaving a bloody trail on the wall. His eyes were open, staring at Odious with an expression of pain and incomprehension. Zephyr screamed and tried to run back into the room, but Artemis was faster. The third shot rang out as Zephyr was almost at his bedroom door. The bullet hit him in the back, and he fell face down in the hallway. The apartment fell silent. Only the kettle continued to rattle on the stove, ready to boil. Artemis walked over to the stove and turned off the gas. He looked at the bodies on the floor, Yesha in the kitchen, Davis and Zephyr in the hallway, his family, or what he considered his family. There was blood on his hands. Odious went to the bathroom and turned on the tap. Hot water washed the red from his hands. His face was reflected in the mirror, calm, almost indifferent, as if the blood on his hands and the 3 dead bodies in the apartment were something ordinary. But it wasn't ordinary. He had just killed 3 people. People he had loved for 20 years. People who trusted him, who considered him their protector, the head of their family. Artemis dried his hands with a towel and returned to the hallway. He stopped next to Zephyr's body. Blood from the wound on his back had formed a pool on the floor. Zephyr had always been quiet and thoughtful. He loved to draw and dreamed of becoming an artist. Odious remembered how proud he was of his drawings, how he boasted to his colleagues at work about his son's talent. His son, who was not his son. The neighbors upstairs began banging on the radiator. Then loud voices rang out on the stairs. Someone was shouting, demanding that the door be opened. Odious realized that someone was calling the police. He had to do something. He returned to the living room and raised the gun to his temple. There were 5 bullets in the chamber. 3 had been used. 2 remained, enough to end his life. Odious pulled the trigger. Click, empty. He checked the chamber. 3 spent casings. 2 bullets should have been intact. But the gun wouldn't fire. Odious tried again. Another click. The mechanism was jammed, or the bullets were defective. Panic began to grip him. At first slowly, like a cold wave rising from his stomach to his chest. Then faster and faster. What to do? The police would be there in a few minutes. He couldn't kill himself. He couldn't stay here with 3 dead bodies. Odious threw the gun on the sofa and grabbed his jacket. He had to get out, fast. He opened the front door and looked down the stairs. No one was there. The neighbors had probably hidden in their apartments after hearing the shots. The staircase was quiet, except for muffled voices somewhere below. Odious quickly descended, pressing himself against the wall. On the first floor, he stopped at the front door and cautiously peeked out onto the street. Several neighbors were standing in a group at the entrance across the street, excitedly discussing something. Odious took a deep breath and left the building. He tried to walk calmly, not attracting attention. His heart was pounding, his hands were shaking, every step was difficult, his legs wouldn't listen to him. He turned the corner and ran. He ran without looking where he was going. He ran past familiar houses, past the store where he had bought bread yesterday. Everything seemed unreal, like a dream or a nightmare. He stopped at an intersection, breathing heavily. He could hear sirens in the distance. The police were already on their way to his house. He saw a taxi on the road. He raised his hand to flag it down. The driver, an elderly black man with gray hair, opened the door. "Where are you going?" To the Sunset Motel. Do you know it? Yes, on the outskirts, near the old factory? Yes, quickly, please. The taxi drove off. Odious sat in the back seat, staring out the window. His hands were still shaking. The driver tried to strike up a conversation. You're out early today. In a hurry for work? Yes, work. Something happened? You look very pale. Everything's fine. I just don't feel well. The driver fell silent but continued to glance in the mirror. Odious closed his eyes, trying to calm down. What had he done? 3 people were dead. His family. It didn't matter that they weren't blood relatives. They had lived together for 20 years, loved each other, shared joys and sorrows. 20 minutes later, they arrived at an old motel on the outskirts of town. Otimus paid the driver, giving him too much money, and got out of the car. The taxi drove away, leaving him alone in front of the shabby motel building. Otimus entered the building. The lobby was small and dirty. A young man of about 20 was sitting behind the counter watching television. He was wearing a greasy white robe and a name tag that said, Kevin. Good afternoon. I need a room, said Otimus. For one night? Yes. $40. Cash in advance. Otimus took out his wallet and handed over the money. Kevin gave him the key and went back to the TV. Room 13, second floor to the right. Odious climbed the creaky stairs to the second floor and found his room. It was small and shabby. There was a bed with a sagging mattress, a table, a chair, and a TV. In the corner was a door to a tiny bathroom. He sat down on the bed and only then realized that he didn't know what to do next. He just sat there in the silence of the motel room, listening to the sounds from the street. Occasionally cars drove by, and he could hear the voices of passers-by. At that moment, police cars pulled up to his house. Detective Eldred Cole got out of his car and looked around. He had been with the police for 20 years and had seen many family tragedies, but you never get used to things like this. A small crowd of neighbors stood at the entrance, discussing what had happened. People were talking all at once, each wanting to share what they had heard or seen. I heard 3 shots, said an elderly woman in a dressing gown. First one, then 2 more in quick succession. I saw Odious run out of the building, added a man in overalls. He was running as if someone was chasing him. Detective Karis Pendergrast got out of the second car next to Cole. She was 10 years younger than Cole, but had already established herself as an experienced and attentive investigator. What do we know? Cole asked the officer at the scene. 3 dead, a woman and 2 men. Neighbors heard 3 shots and screams. The call came in around 6:40 a.m. Where's the suspect? Presumably fled. Several neighbors saw a man running out of the building immediately after the shots. The description matches the apartment owner. Cole and Pendergrast went up to the apartment. The stairwell was old, with peeling paint on the walls and a constant smell of urine. They went up to the 4th floor and entered the open apartment. Forensic technicians were already working at the scene. In the kitchen lay the body of a woman in a nightgown. Blood had dried on the floor, forming a dark brown stain. In the hallway were 2 young men. One had fallen next to the door of the children's room, the other almost at the door to his own room. A family drama, said Pendergrast, surveying the crime scene. It looks like it, but what could have led to this? A gun lay on the sofa in the living room. Empty shell casings were scattered nearby. Cole put on gloves and carefully examined the weapon. Registered. We need to check who it's registered to. Pendergrast found documents in the bedroom. Yesha Crowder, 45 years old. Davis and Zephyr Crowder, 20 years old. Marriage certificate and birth certificates for the children. The apartment is registered to Odious Crowder, 50 years old, mechanic. There are some papers on the kitchen table, said one of the detectives. Cole went over and examined the sheet of paper. DNA test results. Odious Crowder had ordered a paternity test. Result: paternity ruled out. There's our motive, said Cole. He found out the kids weren't his and decided to kill the whole family. We need to find him, said Pendergrast. Check his work, his bank cards, maybe he'll try to withdraw money. I've already contacted IT. We'll have the data in an hour. The next few hours were spent in an active search. They drove to the auto repair shop where Odious worked. Jerome, his colleague, was shocked by the news. Oda never seemed aggressive, he said, unable to believe what had happened. Yes, he had been depressed lately, talking about problems in his family, but to kill. Did he mention any suspicions? Asked Pendergrast. Yes, a few months ago he mentioned that he doubted the children were his. I thought it was just paranoia. All married couples have thoughts like that sometimes. Odius's bank transactions were checked. The last one was at a store last night. Street surveillance cameras showed him getting into a taxi a few minutes after the shots were fired, but the license plate number was not visible. Find all the taxis in the area during that time frame, Cole ordered, and make a list of all the motels within a 100-kilometer radius. We'll start checking the closest ones first. Pendergrast contacted the taxi dispatch services. On her third attempt, she found the car she was looking for. The driver remembered the passenger, a nervous man who asked to be taken to the Sunset Motel. He looked bad, the driver said on the phone. I asked if everything was okay, but he said he was just sick. Cole and Pendergast got the address of the motel and drove there with backup. The Sunset Motel was on the outskirts of town, in an industrial area. The building was old and run down. They entered the lobby. The same guy was sitting at the front desk, watching a different program on TV. Police, Cole said, showing his badge. Do you have a guest who checked in this morning? Kevin looked at them with interest. Yes, one person. Room 13. Is something wrong? Describe him. About 50 years old. Black, medium build. He seemed nervous and in a hurry. Cole and Pendergrast exchanged glances. Sounds like Odious. We need to check that room. Do you have a spare key? Sure. They went up to the second floor with backup. They surrounded the door to room 13. Cole knocked on the door. Police! Open the door! Silence. He knocked again, louder. Odious Crowther! Open the door! This is the police! Footsteps could be heard inside. The lock turned and the door opened. Odious stood before them in the same clothes he had worn that morning. He looked tired and dejected, but calm. I knew you'd find me, he said quietly. Odious Crowther, you're under arrest on suspicion of triple murder, said Cole, taking out his handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. I know. I'm guilty. Cole cuffed Odious's wrists. He didn't resist. I did what I had to do, Odious continued. They've been lying to me for 20 years. You can tell that to the police, said Pendergrast. At the station, the official paperwork began. Odious sat in the interrogation room with his hands folded on the table. He looked tired, but not remorseful. Cole and Pendergrast sat down across from him. Before we begin, said Cole, I must read you your rights again. You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. Would you like us to call an attorney? No, I have nothing to hide. Then tell us what happened this morning. Odious sighed and began to speak. He spoke slowly, weighing each word. He told them how, months ago, he had begun to suspect his wife of infidelity. He told them how he had ordered a DNA test without telling anyone. He told them how he had received the results last night. I've been raising someone else's children all this time, he said, staring at the table. 20 years of my life were based on a lie. And that justifies murder? Pendergrast asked. No, nothing justifies murder. But I couldn't live with that knowledge. I couldn't look at them and know that it was all a lie. Odious took a crumpled piece of paper out of his pocket. It was the DNA test results. He placed it on the table between himself and the detectives. I showed this to Yesha last night, she confessed. She said there was another man 20 years ago when we first started dating. She thought the children were mine, but she wasn't sure. And you decided to kill her? Not right away. I left the house and walked around the neighborhood. I thought about what to do next. I came back in the morning. Everyone was asleep. I took out the gun. Why? At first I wanted to shoot myself, but then I thought, why should I die? They were the ones who lied to me. Odious told us about the shots, how he killed Yeshua when she came into the kitchen, how he shot Davis and Zephyr when they came running at the sound. I didn't plan to kill the boys, he said, but when I saw them, I realized I couldn't let them live. They were a reminder of her lies. After the shots, did you try to kill yourself? Yes, but the gun didn't fire. The mechanism must have jammed. I panicked and ran away. The interrogation lasted 4 hours. The detectives asked questions. clarified details, and wrote down every word. Odious answered honestly and in detail, as if he wanted to clear himself of the burden. "Do you understand the seriousness of your actions?" Pendergrast asked at the end. "Yes, I killed 3 people. People I loved." "Do you regret what you did?" Odious paused. For the first time during the entire interrogation, his voice trembled. "I regret many things. I regret learning the truth. I regret not being able to forgive. I regret not trying to talk things out calmly. But most of all, I regret taking the lives of 2 young men who considered me their father." The trial began 3 months later. The case was simple and clear. The evidence was irrefutable. Witness statements from neighbors, ballistics reports, findings at the crime scene, and most importantly, Odious's full confession. He did not hire a lawyer. He said he didn't want to defend himself. In court, he sat calmly, listening as his crimes were read out, and witnesses described the events of that morning. The prosecutor demanded the maximum punishment. The court-appointed lawyer tried to find mitigating circumstances, talking about psychological shock and temporary insanity. But it didn't help. Odious made his final statement. He spoke briefly, without emotion. "I am guilty of what I am accused of. I killed 3 people. I am not looking for excuses for my actions. Nothing can justify murder. The only thing I want to say is that I did not act out of hatred, but out of pain. But that does not change the gravity of my crime." The sentence was expected: life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole. The judge read it out in a calm voice. Odious accepted the sentence without emotion. As he was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, he caught the eye of Detective Cole, who was sitting in the gallery. Detective Cole watched, thinking about how easily a human life could be destroyed. One secret, one lie, one moment of weakness, and everything falls apart. He had seen many family tragedies in his career, but this story touched him deeply.